What really has been your experience in the pandemic as a mother, family caregiver, and what are some of the core challenges that you've been dealing with?
This is my son, Ivor. He was born on March 8th, so he's only 10 weeks old. So there was a lot of complications with him. He was in the NICU for 9 days, for instance, and now he is in a brace and pending a surgery in a couple months. So he's had a rough little go to the first couple months of life. But not only that, like during the pregnancy, there are quite a few complications on my side as well. And before that, prior to him, we actually had a miscarriage. So it's been quite the journey. And this was all, I think we got pregnant February 2020 and with the first child. And obviously the pandemic hit March 2020. And so this whole time we have been in our, childhood journey with during the pandemic. And so,
Wow.
not having the opportunity to have support in the same way that we probably would have sans pandemic, that has been a major challenge. Obviously only one parent can come in to see the physician at a time. We have probably 3 to 4 doctor visits a week with Ivor. So, juggling between my husband and I, trying to get him to his physio appointments, the hip specialists and whatnot. So it's been quite the ride. And one of the things for me that I would say is the biggest core challenge is the fact that we don't have these mother support groups that, I would have had access to not in a pandemic era. I mean, we can have support groups via Zoom, but it's not quite the same when your child can't actually interact with another baby and you can't interact with another mother in the same physical way. And especially someone who's going through the same thing. So that's it's been quite the ride, and yeah, that's the major challenges. I summed up.
Sometimes we think Mother's Day and it's one day, but this year at the foundation we're making it much more robust and want to bring the real experiences forward. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing that experience with us.
Like Chelsea, it feels like the past year and a half, your whole life becomes months. People remember the months of things. That February, March was when COVID was hitting, and it was, March was COVID. April, my father was diagnosed with cancer. June, he started treatment. August, we started hospice. September, he passed. October, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. About 3 weeks, a month ago, she passed. So it was caregiving was like the theme of my life for about a year. And then combine that with 2 rambunctious girls who are grade school age and who were at home. One doing at-home learning, one who we actually flipped to at-home schooling on our own. And it just, to me, the theme constantly of caring and how that old feminist adage of the second shift felt like it just became the never-ending shift. I think for me, it was really about just setting clear boundaries and really trying to balance that lovely age-old mother's guilt that I was never quite doing anything as well as I wanted to be. I wasn't a supportive enough daughter. I wasn't, being a good enough mom. I wasn't the best ED that I could be. It seemed like there was a constant list of things that it felt like you could be doing better at. And a lot of it, I think, relates to what Chelsea was saying, was that lack of the social supports not being there. That if I would have went to a mother support group for my kids, I would have went to tutoring groups. I would have went to just an open motherhood support group. I probably would have went to some in-person, grief counseling groups. And so that lack of social connection, I think, was just really the biggest challenge for sure, like for everybody.
I just want to say so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your story.
To give a bit of context, I would say myself and my family are new immigrants to Canada. So we moved just a couple of months before, just a handful of months before the pandemic. And I am extremely grateful, to be a mother and a caregiver to my family, but it's been extremely challenging. It's been a constant cycle of exhaustion, trying to balance, work, chores around the house. Um, Most of it I probably put on myself. There's this, I probably set high expectations for myself or make myself feel like I need to do it all, from, the 9 to 5 to the two little ones to the virtual learning to cooking, cleaning, just trying to take up everything and be there for every member of my family. But given everything that is happening, there's so many distractions. So maybe something at work that could take me 30 minutes will end up taking, much longer. But still also trying to create time for the family and be present. So it's been challenging. And then just, with the added flavor of being a new immigrant, I feel like, my social network or social bubble is not that great, or well, not that large. So just having that support that you can call despite the pandemic, for a couple minutes, like just getting an hour for yourself, really, it was not really available. And that mother's guilt, trying to be there for the kids, trying to provide for them as best as you can, and personally feeling like maybe you haven't reached the mark. Just it's it's been a big part of the emotions I felt during this pandemic.
I'm going to ask my friend and comrade Andrea Dix, who's going to ask the next question. So over to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Paulette. And thank you all for sharing your stories with such honesty. It's really an honor to witness this conversation and to be part of today's important dialogue. I'm curious if you have witnessed an upside in any of the public conversations that are taking place around mothering and caregiving.
Like for me, I think back to like the initial months when anything and everything that people were bringing to the shelter, which is where I work, was things to thank us for being heroes. And so, and not, it's fantastic and everyone's doing great work and definitely, but there's a part of me that went like, we're doing the same things that we were doing a month before this pandemic, but now suddenly, obviously, like the light is shining brighter on it. But for the first time, instead of just shining a light into the gap and doing individual stories about women, it was finally taking a second for the bigger story to go, why was this big hole here for all these women to fall into the first place? And what do we do to get rid of the gap so that women don't keep falling into it?
I see that too, and I'm optimistic that the efforts for many years of folks like those who are connected to the Canadian Women's Foundation, that the efforts that they have been taking are now at a place where that spotlight, as you said, is going to catalyze more action and really tangible action to address the systemic failures that we've been living with.
I would say they haven't really been specific to mothering or caregiving as they cut across everyone, but I would definitely say there's been a heightened conversation on mental health. And the pandemic has definitely brought that to the forefront and shown a light on that. Now there's even across the schools that our kids go to, right? Their courses, their webcast learnings on how to deal with the mental state of our kids, of the mothers, of the primary caregivers, and I think that having that conversation being brought to the forefront is good, because it was maybe like in the dark and not everyone, almost in some instances a taboo subject, but more and more people are open to talking about it and sharing some of the experiences they have which they previously may not have, and then realizing that it's okay to say this is going on, and to take some time for yourself, or to seek some specialist help, or just have some kind of support system. So that I would say is one of the main upsides that I've seen.
Yeah, and definitely in terms of upsides, one of the things I've noticed is the sort of the conversation around work-life balance. It's not what I expected. You know, when we started the whole pandemic in March, it was like, am I going to be able to have a baby and work full time and have some sanity and see my friends and all of this? And actually, I work full time right now. I've been working full time this entire time, and I elected not to take a mat leave. And I thought that maybe my firm would not be so supportive of that. But because we've had so many conversations about the importance of work-life balance and especially in, fostering good relationships in the home life while you're working from home, they've been super supportive of me working and raising a child all under one roof.
We've been doing focus groups, and one of the interesting things that we've noticed is how many mothers who are struggling, like you've all talked about in different ways, are also saying, but I don't have it that bad. I think about what others are going through, and so mine's not so bad. Or people that we're talking to truly care about wanting to make sure others are being considered and not just themselves, right? So wanting to make sure we're looking right across the board and making sure others are included. So right now, I'm interested in what you think real community care for mothers or family caregivers needs to look like. What do you think it needs to look like? And then are there things that we need to do better?
Community care during the pandemic was about just trying to survive as moms in these conditions that are definitely sort of stacked against us. And it's strange for me because I run a shelter, so that is a form of community care. And for me, it's about seeing, yes, the policy shifts that need to occur and the assistance with childcare and filling gender wage gaps in these large, giant, scary things that are hard to wrap your head around sometimes. And then paring it down in a way that's really tangible to see the cultural shift away from acknowledging that women and that moms are overstretched and need to feel better, but moving away from the expectation that we have to create that ourselves. So I think a lot of times it's really individualistic, and it's sort of pushed on, the idea that I don't know, if I listen to my favorite CD on the drive home from work, that's going to be restorative. And then I get home and my dishes still aren't done and my dog is still not walked and it's still been a 12-hour day and I haven't spent time with my kids. And so I feel like we want overstretched moms to feel better, but without necessarily having to create that themselves. So for community, it's been looking at everything from having joined online community mom groups, which is something that never in a million years would I have thought that I do. So it's been reaching out and creating social connection in a different way, I think, than we are before. And then a big one for me is the idea of just maintaining those connections and then making sure that our policies are also reflecting the cultural shift. And for me, the cultural shift is looking at Chelsea, who is sitting there working diligently, with her child with her. And I think back to 10 years ago when I would hide in my office and I was exclusively pumping. And I would pump and try and be done in between meetings because God forbid anybody knew that I still had to do this thing that, kept my kid alive. And so it's nice to see that it's the stigma, I guess, is lifting on that a bit, if that makes sense.
The pandemic has definitely made it more acceptable for your kids to come in and out of your Zoom calls, right? It's no one before it would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, you would apologize. But now it's like, oh yeah, they're in the background. I have them and we're all at home, virtual school. And so it's definitely more, everyone is more accepting of the different circumstances that we might be in. And then I feel like in terms of what real community care needs to look like, it's support for women. I can't stress that enough in every sense of the word. If be it from a new immigrant point of view, access to childcare on demand that will not necessarily break the bank. Just sometimes you just need an hour or two or a bit longer, but knowing that, that access to childcare, in a safe and secure environment that you are comfortable with, having those types of places available, and a bit of awareness, about community care, around where we stay, that, look, it's okay as a mom to want these things, or to have these problems, or to want to reach out to connect with other people, and there are places where you can get that kind of support without being put in some kind of stereotype. So I think, support, access to childcare, and like empathy from everyone. And then maybe also, just to wrap it up, like trying to move the message from the challenges, the problems, the stress, and I think that's what the Canadian Women's Foundation is doing, and trying to shift the focus to what can be done. How can we make this a success story for all of us? How can we support each other? How can we have that happy ending despite everything that is going on in the pandemic? I know there are different measures of what success is or happiness is to different people, but just trying to set up those structures so that we can shift the story, and just be happy.
I just recently started doing a gratitude journal. So every night I sort of write 3 to 5 things that I'm, grateful for, and it's really gotten me to think differently about, I have a roof over my head, I've got food on the table, I still have a job right now. And then I often think, I don't have it that bad, and I think about all the other mothers that are out there and whatnot. But I think one of the important things is that regardless of your situation, there is always going to be a form of caregiver fatigue. There's going to be postpartum depression or baby blues, or even just in general fatigue, or for instance, video fatigue is something that has been talked about a lot. This kind of way that we interact now. And so in general, it doesn't matter the situation that one is in. We all need to recognize that life has thrown us a big curveball, and how we're going to. Yeah, he agrees with that.
It does.
Of course, this is when you cry. Hey? Doesn't matter the situation that one is in. We all need to recognize that asking for help and needing help is normal, and it's not to be diminished by any means.